So,
Sounds good.
okay. Okay. More people are coming.
Hey, how you doing, Marcus?
Hey.
I'm going to be switching between machines, so I'm going to go off of video for a second here.
Okay. Hey,
Hello.
yeah, very, very good to see you all. Um, Thank you for being part of this course. Um, Very happy to see that the response has been, very good. I didn't really expect more than like say 6, 7, 8 people maybe, but I think 17 people have signed up. And with a group of that size, it's really I think it's going to be impossible to always find an appointment where everybody can be there. And I heard that it's Valentine's Day today, so happy Valentine's to all of you. Love you. Actually, I don't even know what Valentine's Day means because it's really something that I didn't grow up with. So, and I'm old-fashioned, as you know. Yeah. I'm just kidding. Yeah, we can see how the conversation here like this goes. Usually, we won't be needing an instrument, for these meetings, because we're going to talk about observations, like new ideas, new exercises, and I'm not sure if I made that totally clear, but this course is like it's almost the whole year. So the idea is that we have enough time for everybody individually to find their way into improvisation in some sort of way, And that's really also like the first thing I want to kind of like start out with. Um, like before, like we don't really need an introduction round or something. I don't think so. Let's just make that happen by discussing. And then as people chime in, we get to know them and we can hear what they have to say or what they're expecting of this course, you know. So it's important for me to kind of like find out, like obviously, in a way, I already know what the whole spaces that we can work in within improvisation. There are so many angles, and maybe there are a lot of angles that I'm aware of that maybe you're not even aware of. But still, I want to collect sort of some ideas of what you think, what you individually, what you would like to really learn this year. And I'm at this point, I'd say like I can guarantee that if you take part in this course, you will actually learn what you want to learn, even if it's like really high aim. Like, okay, I could say, like I said to me in 1995, I said I want to be able to play like Keith Jarrett. I'm not playing the piano, so that's why it's difficult to really test if I if I manage to get there. But anyway. So, yeah, welcome again. And I'm going to share the emails. Nobody has had any objections about that, so that's great. So, we're going to use sort of like an email list. So, it's going to be very private, just our group. We can write to each other, we can respond to the whole mailing list. We can also respond to individual people if you want to talk with somebody individually, and you can write to me individually, of course, and I'll be available at all times. That's sort of like my idea. I won't be writing long letters as responses, maybe just a couple sentences, but I want to be available for you throughout this year. Anytime you wanna discuss something or you need something from me. Okay? If that becomes too much, I will tell you. But I think it's gonna be fine. Okay, so don't hold back, don't hesitate, always contact me. Okay, so Rob, your microphone is unmuted, so you can start. What do you want to learn?
Okay. Hey, Marcus, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
All
Yep.
right. Sometimes my microphone behaves and sometimes it does not. So Marcus, you remember last year, a few months ago, we had a lesson getting me started on improvisation, which is something I've really wanted to dig into. So I've dabbled into it a bit. I find it extremely fulfilling, the little bit that I've done. So my expectation from this course is really give me a group of people to work with and ideas and exchange and some structure around advancing improvisation. I'm starting from a early stage, but I see a vast world of opportunity there. So not sure exactly what my target is. I just want to grow and learn over the next year and get better at it.
Fantastic. So what do you guys kind of like think improvisation really is? I mean, like I think the word is could be very misleading in a way. It could also just be like even very restrictive in what people think about it, right? So anybody has any idea, wants to say anything about what you consider to improvisation? And like, because Rob was talking about improvisation, but he didn't specify what he meant, what he actually means, right? So this is something that is going to be important that, and we don't need to do that today. And maybe it's going to take the whole year for you individually to find out what it really means for you, right?
So when I say improvisation, it's really the confidence and ability to play an unlearned or even spontaneous piece of music, either alone or with other people,
Mhm.
or at least knowing how to jump in and make some contribution to the piece. Because much of my experience with bass and with touch guitar is learning music and playing it.
Yeah.
This is to me, improvisation is creating music on the fly, so to speak.
Great.
Is
That's
that
a great,
fair?
that's a, yeah, great
Okay.
definition. Yeah, for sure.
I would say similar and more partly responding to a band as well. If you're playing with others, it's responding what music you can make to complement the others in the band, or just against a drone, maybe, which
Yeah.
or a looper or something like that. Again, making stuff on the fly, but actually being able to hear and respond to others or something you've generated yourself. I think I would say that's part of it. Um,
Yeah, perfect, Mark. And you mentioned drones, you mentioned loopers, things like that we can use and we will use, for sure, for sure. There's just one thing that you did not mention, which is very important, which is that you can also improvise with silence. You can improvise. You don't have to have a drone. You
mm,
don't have to have a sound. You don't have to have anything to respond to in order to improvise. You can also make the improvisation come purely out of itself. It does not have to have a context. The interesting thing about that is that once we make the first sound, we have context.
mm,
So we can think of musical context in improvisation as something that unfolds linearly, right? But also in parallel. Like you could have, like this first thing that you played could play a role within a melody, you could say, or that first note could be the note that you refer to as a drone, let's say. So it could kind of like switch a different level in terms of importance. It
mm.
could kind of like go to a more fundamental level, or it could also be something that you erase from the context, right? So that's what I'm saying. So like the context is very, very important, but the context can also be nothing, right? So this is something that's very important to never forget because like with any level of improvisation we're looking at, if it's sort of like physical skill, let's say, or mental skills like music theory or things like that, or even emotional skills, right? Like feeling sadness, being able to really feel sadness or to feel happiness or any kind of like emotion basically can sort of influence what kind of sound you're going to make, right? So it's so on these three levels, context always plays a big role. So, for example, like going on stage for an improvised concert and you had an argument just before the show and like wondering like how and does that even change the improvisation? Like from my experience nowadays, I would say that the context is always very, very important, but it can also be overwritten by something that I don't have a word for.
Mm,
You know? So yes, fantastic. That's exactly kind of like what I'm talking about. Yeah,
cool.
yeah. And at the same time, also, we can use very big words for improvisation, but improvisation can also be very, very simple in the sense that we take it in a very traditional way, and we kind of know we can play, let's say, a few notes, like we can take the drone as an example, or we make a drone with three notes, we make a chord. It doesn't really matter what the chord is called, but we could say C major chord consists of the notes C, E, G. We can learn the notes C, E, and G on our instrument, and we can learn to play the notes C, E, and G in an order that makes a melody. And we can also learn to play the notes in such a way, each individual note in such a way that it sort of makes it work musically. So maybe it's a soft note. First note is soft, second note is very loud, right? Something like that. Or first note is lower than the second note. We have all of these ways to kind of like paint with the materials that we use. And the materials could be something that we consciously make fit to a certain grid, like this chord. We say we can only use notes that are within this chord. This would be a restriction that we can set ourselves in order to create an exercise for ourselves, right? So, and that's a level that's always available to us to say, okay, we're setting some sort of system, some sort of restriction, and within that restriction, we work, we do something, we can even say we do anything, and then by doing that, we kind of have the experience of doing it. We listen to it as we do it. We have the option to record ourselves, either on, just audio or audio and video. You can do both. And you have some sort of feedback loop. You get into that feedback loop, and simply by engaging with the process like that, you will learn and you will add to your skill set of improvisation in the sense that Rob mentioned it, where you create music in the moment, right? And then, like, okay, now I said create music in the moment. Then the definition of music is obviously very elusive. Like, what even is music, right? So it's really pretty much about the thing that you experience as something that's worthwhile generating, right? And ideally, and we know that with great musicians, let's say known or unknown, doesn't really matter, but like we only know of the known musicians, right? So what they find a way to do the things that they do, the things that they like, or the things that they're capable of doing. Sometimes they don't even like them much, right? But then that becomes their language. I mean, not language as language, but it's something that then sort of speaks to other people, and where other people then identify that sound of improvisation with that person. Well, right? And so this, and in a way, this is already pretty much what we can look for as musicians. Okay, Mark Pilath is entering now. Let me admit him here. Sorry. Is he showing up? Yes. Hi, Mark. Hi, Mark. Um, So yeah, let's talk about this more. Like I think there's really I've already said a lot, but Gio, you want to say something?
Yes, I mean, I think for me, I want to kind of discover more how I can emote without really thinking about it, but keeping it fluid. And also maybe break away from some of the things that, there are safe zones, and that may define sort of how an individual expresses, but also at the same time, maybe break away from some of the habits so that you can create other new sounds and, find new ways to emote. I think it's really important to understand, like you said, like the context. If it's with a band, there's chemistry. All those things can change pretty rapidly. But I think how you improvise also means it comes with a balance too. It doesn't mean necessarily throwing a whole bunch of notes all at once or necessarily holding back. I mean, you have to know through what's happening at that given moment when it's time to move on something else. You know what I mean? Um, yeah, I mean, I think that for this course, having the discipline and the structure to do these things is going to be really advantageous. I'll do loops and practice and whatnot, and I find myself kind of falling into a lot of the same patterns and a lot of the same things, which is just okay. Again, I'm just trying to build fluidity, but kind of break away from that too.
Mhm. Yeah, Giovanni, like the first thing I was picking up was the word emote when you said emote, like, and that would be interesting to talk about that, what that even means, right? And then the other thing is that I'm hearing is that I would just say there are no rules, right? Like sometimes it can be exactly the right thing to play all the notes at the same time, right? And really like the real, like let's say the real mastery or even like the genius level of improvisation would be where you can do anything at any time and it will always be right because you just embody the decision, let's say. Like you are the improvised thing in that moment. It's you, right? So that's why, like this psychological aspect of making music or improvising, especially in improvisation, is very can be very difficult for people to learn to um, to, to not feel bad about a note that doesn't sound the way that you would expect, let's say. So, like, say, even if you're a great, accomplished player, let's say, and there's like a friend of yours playing bass, playing a low E note, boom, 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 whatever, and you know how to play on an E. You just take your pentatonics, whatever. You take the notes that work, and can be just one note. You play it, and at some point, your bass player friend will change that note from E to F, let's say, right? And because you just played an F sharp because it works really well with E, right? Suddenly you get like something that's like incredibly horrible for that moment. So the trick is like how do you respond to that? Like how do you respond to that situation? And I'm not really talking about how do you respond musically, how do you respond actually with the instrument. What I'm talking is about what kind of feeling, what kind of stress, let's say, does your body and your mind get in the moment where something unexpected happens? And that's where the real mastery lies in not feeling anything in that moment. And I know it sounds strange. It sounds like we as humans, or especially like, yeah, as humans, or sort of like in a humanistic way, feelings and emotions are sort of like very important to us and are always like presented to us as being very important, and they are. But in a case like this, where you want to be open to be the improvised, right? So it's not that I improvise in the moment where I improvise, I'm the improvised. And in that moment, I don't really have the emotional responsibility for what somebody else would think. Right? So that means that for myself, I can decide not to feel bad about playing a note that sounds out of place because you just don't have the responsibility at that point. You really don't, you know? And if you have a clear head and like no emotions at that moment, you can just say, okay, I like this tension. I'm going to stay here.
Mhm.
Yeah. Or you can say, okay, no, this tension is awkward. I want to fix it. So,
Right.
and when I'm talking about tension, right? Tension can be that the note doesn't sound in tune, let's say, or doesn't sound in tone, or doesn't is not in rhythm, is not in time, right? And so if you play a note that's not in time, you can try to correct it by playing that note again in time, whatever that is, again, that's your definition. Um, or you decide to not play in time, right? Or you decide not to care, which is the hardest part. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Mm.
Yeah,
Say,
totally. I
Yeah.
did want to also add to that, it's like you have to be self-aware at the same time that you're focused on yourself, but also with how you're reacting to everything else outside of you. Sort of like in this weird uh, spot, like sort of in the center of, and you can make that decision, or you can choose, like you said, to not. Somebody else has made the decision, and you can choose to react or not. But regardless, I mean, you have to be self-aware, and you have to be aware of also what's happening around you, what's impacting you. So.
it's a very, very good point. And and I agree. So it's important to also be aware, or you can be listening to what's happening around you. If you're playing with somebody else, with a group of people, or just with yourself, right? So you can kind of like listen to the context, let's say, right? However, you don't want the context in this case, right, to make you react. Right? It's not that you need to react to the context. That's what I just said with that example of the bass player playing the note E, right? And then
Yeah.
suddenly changing to F because it's unexpected. There can be unexpected changes that happen. And all you need to do in that moment is to listen. So you only listen, you do not change what you do. I mean, it will change itself. Right? You don't have to have an action attached to
Right.
somebody changing the context, right?
Right.
And that is the most difficult thing. And this is something that we're going to very consciously study. We're going to have like these exercises where we're learning to play wrong notes, where we're learning to not to consciously being unconscious of what we play. Right. And this is, I'm going to introduce this word now. There's some sort of gestural playing where we can say, rather than knowing, okay, I'm going to play random notes from this scale, let's say, from a particular scale, you can say, okay, I'm just going to do, or I'm going to do, or whatever kind of representation you want to have of the kind of sound or gesture you want to make. You can just make a gesture and you don't have to be aware of what the technicalities are of that, right? Which, on the other hand, means that if we want to practice technicalities, we can practice those very consciously. We can practice to play the notes of a scale. We can practice to be aware of what the notes are. Like, okay, the bass player changed the note. Oh, he just moved up a half step. I heard that. So he moved to F. Fine. So now I can consciously choose to play some other notes, right? So that's why we will also have, in addition to like the gestural stuff, we're going to have the opposite. We're going to have some ear training things where we will learn to hear what do all the 12 notes sound like in relationship to a specific chord or to a specific note or something. And the cool thing is that this experience of what that is, we don't have to have theoretical knowledge for that. So even like if you don't want to learn or know uh, what those words are, let's say, to describe certain pitches or a pitch class or a chord or whatever, you don't really need to know that, right? It's about experiencing it. And so that's why whenever I'm offering something like this in an exercise, I'm just going to write something, use the notes C, E, and G again as an example, right? And you don't know what that means, obviously you have to ask me, right? If you do know what it means, you can use that. You don't, and I will also always make clear when there is a certain terminology that is maybe unnecessary, right? Because, and just to use this as an example, in improvisation, when people say, "Okay, hey, take a solo. This section is in C major." So what does that person imply with that? What does it mean to you, right? What does it mean? What does it actually mean? It means kind of in that moment, it really just means nothing. And you just know that somehow that person thinks of that piece of music as something that relates to the note C. Okay. And then like really like the one conclusion you can draw is that okay, the note C should be safe. I can just play a C and I'll be safe. All right. Yeah. But like beyond that, it's not really obvious. Okay, let's just continue. Any other kind of thoughts about what you want to learn?
If I may.
Yes.
Hi there.
Yeah,
Marcelo here. Hi there. I mean, I would start with the improvisation. I guess maybe it's a little bit of a contradictory term when I say it controlled freedom.
hmm
Control for me would mean knowledge and freedom. They are both connected to what I expect through that knowledge. I mean, I played in bands in the past, but it's just like for me, what I also at the same time expect for this course is like because I play standard guitar tunings and since a few years I got myself a Chapman stick and then I started experimenting with the instrument. But it's just like for me it was like okay, I can do anything by myself. I can create sounds, I can play around, and then with the touch guitar I realized well this is more interesting because of the tuning. And for me my expectations for the course would be like how exactly mechanically and theoretically I can now with this course translate that knowledge when I look at it without thinking too much because I already when I have the instrument since a few weeks. I mean I can play around with it. I can it's wonderful to play with it actually, but at the same time I feel like all right, where do I go from here?
Yes.
And that's what I expect from the course because improvisation for me is not a big thing. I can really play even with bands we improvised. I just I would say for myself personally I don't really have a very deep knowledge of music theory, but I understand very well and I can hear very good. Of
Yes.
course, and that's my thing would be like okay, I have a touch guitar and I want to be able to when I play now with that instrument with others I can translate that knowledge and have the freedom. That's why I control freedom. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And this is a very good example that for you, well, let's say maybe what you need to learn or what you want to learn about the subject improvisation is very different from somebody else who's never improvised or never improvised in front of people, let's say, It can be very, very different, or somebody who has no knowledge about music theory. But then it could also be that there's somebody who's like an amazing composer, knows everything about music theory, right? But has never really allowed, himself or herself to actually come up with something music in the moment, right? So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
where so Marcelo, like I'm completely with you. We're gonna have that kind of content for sure,
Hmm.
right? So that kind of like relates everything like to the touch instrument. Yeah. But that's not going to be the only thing. And I just
Hmm.
want you to be open to also take sort of like all the other impulses I'm going to give here for you to try out more things.
Yeah.
And what you do is for this course, you'd simply use the touch instrument as your
Yeah. Yeah.
field of experimentation. And that way
Exactly.
you will get something out of every single thing that we're going to do, I'm sure.
Yeah. That's my
Yeah.
main. That's my main target anyway. It's just
Yes,
like
yes, yes.
that. nothing else in between. Just
Yes.
that thing I wanna, you know, even more fall in love with it.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah, of course. Hal, we can't hear you.
Hmm.
Yeah. So, okay. Somebody else? Yeah, Craig?
Yeah, so I don't improvise much at all,
Hmm.
in my day job. Um,
Hmm.
Obviously, I've thought of the idea, and I also know a lot of people who do it, but I feel like it's easy to, just as we practice, we get in our certain comfort zones. Even with improvisation, I think this has sort of been said in different words that you can get in a comfort zone,
Yeah.
things to feel good to you, whether it's sonic wise or fingering technique wise. And then from there, it's easy to make the big leap, skipping over a lot of things to the playing anything, but without any real plan or direction, which is technically entirely free, but you really don't know what you're not in charge. You're sort of being pulled along by whatever comes out without intent or, understanding, even depending on the situation. So I want to sort of try and move into that area between those two
Yes.
where it's not, you know, basically the bag of tricks and just playing this, rejiggering the same things, nor
Yes.
do I want it to be just entirely random without purpose.
Yeah. Craig, and you know that the way to do that is to be not being judgmental about either side, let's say. That's how you can position yourself in that middle, right? And that's what we're going to work on for sure. It's
Mhm.
very, very important. I think that this this idea of doing random things, let's say, well,
Yeah.
just letting your fingers move, right? For example, is so incredibly important, right? But obviously, like we can see that a lot with people that start playing guitar, that's for example, because before they actually are free, they learn the pentatonic scale, let's say. And then they think that freedom is just
Playing
playing within the
potentially
pentatonic scale, right?
different notes, right?
But freedom would really entail actual freedom. So that means the physical freedom to go to any note at any time, right?
Yep.
Then to accept any note at any time as being the right note,
Mhm.
any sound to be the right sound at any time, right? Any emotion to be the right emotion at any time, etc., etc. Right? So really, I think that we will always do both. We'll always have something, a little something where we practice in a very structured way with our, let's just use C, E, and G again as an example, right? We do that, or we're on the other side where we can be completely free, and that means we will learn with sort of like little instructions like that. Okay, so now play three notes high up on the neck and then please play three notes that are very low. Right? That's all it is. And I tell you, okay, like you have 30 minutes, you have a 30-minute session to do exactly that. And you can do that without a drone, you can do it with a drone, you can have like um, Hotel California play in the background, whatever, like you whatever context you want to generate for yourself, but then you apply this little exercise. Right? So the exercise could go from the things that scare you, where you have no control, where you actually want to learn to have no control, and where you want to learn to feel okay with having no control, to going to the other side, where you learn to feel okay with knowing what you're doing, because we know that argument exists a lot in the world of music as well, where people think that if they learn too much about music, that they're not spontaneous anymore, which doesn't make sense really. But it's like, so what we want to learn is we want to be open for the full range of possibilities, of human options, of, like we say, including the emotions, right? And that's going to be really like a major thing where I hope that we as a group can be supportive with each other, right? So like if you say, okay, like I've done this exercise for 3 days or for 3 weeks, I've played 30 minutes a day just moving my hands, not knowing what I'm doing, right? And but it feels like nothing is changing, right? Then we can be supportive with each other. We could say, okay, it's great that you've done this. You have the experience now. Like, what do you want to change? What's the next step? Or do you want to continue? Want to try continue it for another 3 weeks and see what happens, right? Maybe after 3 weeks you say, wow, this is so cool. Like I now feel that my hands really like suddenly they know how to go to that note that I think is right. Like, you were just throwing like darts at a dartboard, like having no idea. But then subconsciously, your body learns how to correct itself, right? This is like where, like Marcello used your word control, but really, it's not necessarily control. It is sort of like allowing a feedback circle to actually close. Say, okay, like my body now hears something, it experiences something, and it can actually express something. It can find the note that before I was not able to find. So that would be one approach to say, okay, we just move our hands randomly until they find the notes, until they find the right thing. For some people, it can be extremely difficult to work like that. I totally get it. I understand it. And if an approach like that doesn't work for you, then there is going to be an alternative exercise, an alternative path for you, right? So that this is like very important to me. Like we can always pick the things that work for us. And I wanted to mention that I'm going to take part in the course myself as much as I can. So I'm going to work with the same materials that you're going to work with.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Okay, anything else? Any other ideas like improvisation, jazz improvisation, for example, is something that, like, what really is it? Like, we already talked about free improvisation, jazz improvisation. Then we can have, like I said, the gestural improvisation. We could have um, improvisation as composition, right? Like this is something that Rob said. Like that, what Rob said was went into that direction. Okay, you want to be able to create in the moment, music in the moment. And then we can say, okay, what do you mean with music? We could say, okay, let's just simplify it. An order of notes, a sequence of notes with a rhythm attached that sounds like, again, for lack of a better term, a melody. Right. That sounds melodic to me. That sort of has some meaning, right? And then again, you could say, okay, how can we actually even measure that? And again, the measure we need to measure ourselves. We need to be the measuring tool ourselves. And because it's our taste event in the end that makes who we are as musicians or as people in the world, right? It's like, what do we think is right? What do we allow ourselves to do? Yeah. So jazz improvisation, we can look into that kind of thing as well. It's sort of like part of what we're doing here. Jazz improvisation traditionally is very much something that comes from a tradition that is actually a living tradition, where, and I mean, I don't want to go into the history of it, but let's say it was, people singing the blues, let's say, right? And so rather than being obsessed with writing everything down, you would memorize licks, you would memorize ideas. And then you would start putting these licks together and you would find a sound. You would find like these little, I don't know the word, inflections or whatever that sort of like give you like the blue note or something like that. That really wasn't really something that was around before that. And then the drum kit came around. Like, there was the drum set. People were putting together drums to make something, and then there was like somebody thought, okay, like, yeah, what does it sound like with a bass instrument? Blah, and then like a solo. It's like all these things they come together, and then they said, okay, rather than playing like the music that somebody else has written, you know, let me just play a little folk melody. And we know like a lot of like the traditional jazz music is like folk music, right? And basically then transformed to the new instrumentarium, new instruments, and then people started improvising on the themes, right? So this is why I mentioned jazz improvisation. Jazz improvisation does not really have to sound like jazz, but what, in my understanding, what I would define as that, as improvising on a theme of music. So it's not just that you're improvising on the chord changes or like what a lot of teaching systems make you believe that you basically learn to play over the changes, right? But that's not really what it is. Just imagine you're singing like a tune in your head. So you have a way to have a tune play in your head. And as the tune is playing in your head with your instrument, you embellish the melody. You sort of like add to the melody. You're sort of like creating counterpoint to the melody. That's what jazz improvisation, that's what I would define as jazz improvisation, right? And since the melody moves in a way and it's actually harmonized in most cases, but then as you improvise, it can be reharmonized. It's not important that you understand what I mean by that, right? But that's really what jazz is, that in the moment there is something in the background, there is the tune, and it's being embellished in some way, and that's the improvisation. That's the only thing you're hearing then. You may not be hearing the original melody, you're hearing the improvised melody, right?
Marcus, I have a
Yes.
quick
Yeah.
follow-up question on that. So do you think of it kind of like a counter melody for a melody that's
Yeah, it can be
not
can
being
be
played
seen
at
as
the moment?
a counter melody or as like I say, an embellishment, like an ornamented version of the original melody. Or you could say an ornamented version of the content of the harmonic content that's happening at each time. Also, you can pick up on the rhythms of a melody and sort of like either consciously or subconsciously repeat phrases, rhythmic phrases from a melody. And really, in a lot of traditional jazz, that's really what is being done. It's not so much about expressing yourself, really. It's about expressing the composition, expressing the standard, the tradition of that sound, really. And it's actually the same, or pretty even much stronger, more so in Indian classical music, for example, where like when we learn about Indian classical music, people talk about like ragas, and but they don't really know what raga means. Then they play a scale and they say, oh, it's the raga by Ravi or whatever like names there are. But it's actually not like the raga is actually is a feeling, it's an emotion, it's something that is meant to evoke. So it's a collection of things. It is the notes, yes, it is the scale. But then they say, okay, on the way up, you always have to skip the sixth note of the scale, and on the way down, you have to skip the fourth note of the scale, or something like that. So the rule set, let's say, in other musical cultures may be very different from what we experience in jazz, right? But in the end, the idea is to create, or we could even say recreate a specific mood. Yeah, and like especially in like in American jazz, in American traditional American jazz, that's something that is very prevalent. That that what they want from you is to be able to recreate that sound. It's about that sound. Right? So this is something we can look at and into that here for sure. But we can also look into freer ways of doing things. And so, like my personal take on improvisation is more the one that goes into the direction of composition, where I want to be able to listen back let's say like these looping performances I did, like hundreds of, with Crimson Project, let's say. Um, I just start out recording a drone, and then I play a melody on top. And there is no reference melody for that. There is no tune that was pre-written. The tune just happens in the moment. And the tune comes from my idea of wanting um, to create a piece of music. Like it's very simple. Like and in the moment of doing it, I'm not thinking about it, obviously. That I'm not thinking about the end result as having to be something great or something that I enjoy or whatever. It's not about that, but it's just about like what can I actually deliver in that moment? What can I do? Um, I can actually, at some point, maybe I can send you some examples of pieces where I played a wrong note and it startled me. Uh, and then I just keep playing around with that wrong note, and I make it part of the idea. I can think of a few pieces where I think it's once you hear it, it's pretty obvious that that was a wrong note, and then yeah. But really, so let's go back to what we said earlier on, like the context, right? The context is really something that can be a pre-existing context. It can be an improvised context. The context can be that you say there is no context, like in the traditional free improvisation of the late 60s, for example, like a musical movement that started then. The idea was to never repeat yourself, right? So, and to repeat even the interaction between other players. Really a radical idea. It's a movement I was part of for a long time, actually, in the mid 90s. The idea that you are not allowed to even consider a continuation of an idea. So where it's the idea is to break everything at all times, right? And then to do that with musicality, you know, is extremely challenging, but it works. And there are people who can do it, who do it really well. There are people who do it with traditional musical instruments, but there are also people who do that with found sound things, like where it's really where the musical painting, let's say, just happens with you can do it with anything that's available, and this is maybe the most important thing. You don't need a course on improvisation. You don't need it because you could just improvise now. You can take anything that makes a sound, your voice, your hands, whatever toy you have available. Yeah, Pat Mastelotto with Stickman does this piece of music where he crumbles the bottle. Like it's really, but and when Pat does that, it's interesting. Like what is he really is he doing? Is he just making a noise? No, he's playing music. Like, but he does not have to think about which pitch he's playing, or is he playing this on the two and or on the four and of the beat or whatever. No, it's pure feeling, right? And maybe it's also about the tactile thing. So, like, what does it feel like to him to have that bottle in his hand? Like, what is that? Like, it's sort of very bodily thing, like, right? So now, like, this was nothing, but it was also a musical improvisation that I just did, just purely by putting myself into a feedback loop with the sound and with the sensation of like, what does it feel like to interact with this object? Yeah. And that's what we want to do with the instrument, you know? Get a sense of like, it feels like my hands are kind of like melting into this thing, right? Or maybe they don't. Maybe they won't. It always feels distant and like always feels I have that a lot when I play. I have that really most of the time I have the feeling that I'm fighting it, right? So And again, it doesn't matter because like then people come to me after the show and say, "Oh, well, this was amazing. You played great." And I said, "Oh, I felt horrible. I had to fight all night. The action was too high tonight, because it was cold on stage or things like that happen, right?" And there's all sorts of things that really we need to take ourselves out of the equation because, like I say, we don't have responsibility for what other people hear, which also means that it doesn't really matter what we hear, which is it's it's complicated to wrap your head around, but it's in fact true. Right?
Cool.
Yeah. So, so what I'd like you to do, let's say for the next, what is it, Saturday. So Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. 6 days. You're gonna define, and this is up to you for, I don't want to say, okay, take 10 minutes or take 30 minutes or take an hour or whatever. You have to decide for yourself. You take an amount of time out of the day, out of your day, and I say take because I don't want you to have the time to do this. I want you to take yourself the time. You go there and you decide, okay, I don't care if I'm tired at 11 p.m. at night and like, maybe that's the only moment where I'm, not around family or whatever. I can go in my room and do something. Rather than going to bed, you do your 10 minutes of improvisation. 10 minutes of plugging in the instrument. Well, not plugging it in for 10 minutes. You plug in the instrument, whatever, you turn on the amp or you put on your headphones and you put your hands on the instrument, both of them to start with. And you just before even like playing a note, you just put your fingers on the strings. This can be done with a touch instrument or the bass, like Hal is a bass player. Um, you put your hands on the strings and you just move your hands on the string until you feel like you want to make a sound. And then you make a sound. And the exercise is going to be at any point when you're making a sound and you feel a response, I want you to just become aware of the response. And I mean response as in, let's say, what we call emotions, feelings, but also thoughts. Also, if that's the case, maybe also like little like what does it, like I said, like sometimes it feels like you're fighting with the strings. Or sometimes you can say, okay, today my hands felt warm, and it actually was nice to put the finger down and hear a note, and it felt really round, let's say. Or you can find your own, you need to find your own language to describe the things that you create as you interact with the instrument. And we're starting this basic exercise because it's not about, creating anything in particular, right? And for now, even though, yes, we can use electronics, pedals, blah, 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 things like that, like this initial exercise is just about accepting or like living or experiencing the the clean, pure sound of the instrument, like just plugged into an amp. Yeah. And I think this is going to be um, maybe the greatest thing you can do. Even like I would say, if you do this just for the whole year, you know, you would be a changed person. Yeah. We're not going to do that, but I'm just saying, like, don't think of it as something that is not serious. It's actual serious play to allow yourself to experience not knowing what you're doing with the instrument, but experiencing the feel of the instrument. You don't need to know which notes you're playing. So it also doesn't matter if it's only one finger you use. It's fine. At that point, once you like say you have your 30 minutes, okay, and you at some point it will happen that you think, okay, let's let I want to use the ring finger, or I want even want to try to use the pinky. Right? So it's going to be harder. It feels harder to play with the pinky, but why not? Like nobody's listening. I'm here. Like I'm here with it. Use the pinky, but you don't have to. So, but it's fine. Like I'm saying, you can start with any, like with the preconception of something, but you don't have to. If in the process, that's why I said that you need to pay attention to your thoughts as well. If you're thinking to yourself, oh, this is boring, then, for example, you can kind of like ask yourself, okay, like some part of me thinks this is boring. That's fine. So I continue anyway. Or sometimes if that voice gets too loud, oh, it's this is hurtful. Like it's so boring, it's hurting me. Okay, and they say, okay, let's change something. You know, maybe that's the moment when you need to turn around in the room or sit down or stand up or sometimes I just turn off the lights or turn down like the using the dimmer on the lights or something like that. Or sometimes it could mean like a, maybe you could turn on a metronome, for example, also. Not too loud, just turn on a metronome so you have some sort of reference and you can interact with it. You don't have to interact with it. And as you do that, you can also always go back to the moment where you're just touching the instrument, right? So we are not making a sound, just moving, just experiencing the physical aspect of it. And you can even put your so you can so rather than trying to play real notes, you can just put your hand on the instrument, just feel it like this, feel it out, completely get into it just like this, or even here, you know. It sounds even like when I say it sounds kind of funny, but I can tell you it just makes all the difference. Makes all the difference to develop some sort of physical relationship with this object that is going to be close to your body in the moment that you play, right? Yeah. And but having said that, it's not even that is not important. What is important is that you spend that time that you allocated, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, up to an hour, I would say. And you can also break this down into smaller sections. If you say, "Oh, I can only concentrate for 5 minutes at a time," then do that. Okay, so it's important that you find that you can trick yourself. Let's call it trick yourself into doing this. Yeah? It's more important to do this and to feel shit about it rather than not to do it and feel shit about it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair.
Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah, but isn't it fascinating because that's really like we could apply that to anything we do in life, right?
That's
And
so
it's so
true.
it's so crazy, right? Like why do we as human beings tend to do this kind of like unlogical thing, right? So anyway, the idea is to create a space for yourself, and I say every day because let's just do every day because it's simpler. I've made the mistake to say, okay, like, even when you're like dieting, let's say, and you have your one cheat day, and so it gets complicated. Oh, when was my last cheat day? Right? Or did I cheat at night that day or in the morning? So does that shift when I can start the next cheat day and stuff like that? It gets complicated. So the easiest way of doing these things to develop a discipline, let's say, of doing something, it's just to take the simplest route. And that is to say, and I mean that, I really mean that. always the simplest. So if you feel like it is too much to actually even plug in the instrument, then don't plug it in, but do your time with the instrument, right? So there's obviously at some point, like when you say, okay, no, I'm not gonna interact with the instrument, then you've not done your job, right? But everything else, like, okay, I'm feeling so shit. I need to throw up, let's say, right? Say something extreme, okay? Okay, but that doesn't stop me from, like, I ask my whatever, my friend to bring me the instrument into the bed and put the instrument next to me, and I put my hand on it for 5 minutes. Right? So again, sounds ridiculous, but that kind of dedication is sort of like what is needed so that you don't lose respect for yourself. It's like the big issue that happens that if we start trying to do something and we're not doing it for a few days, that we will never really get back to it because we are ashamed of ourselves. And ideally, and I'm just saying this like slightly tongue in cheek, but we want to create a shame-free experience with this whole course, with us being together doing this and you being with yourself doing something that gives you new input, that gives you new experiences. Yeah. Okay, so we're going to start with this simple thing, and then I'm going to send out like we also, I mean, it's not just that obviously I'm going to be sending out stuff. I'm going to be sending out materials, I'm going to be sending out ideas. Sometimes the email will just have text in it. Sometimes there will be a PDF or something. Then sometimes I will be sending an MP3 file with a 60-minute drone that you can use, for example, things like that, right? So in this, and at the beginning, this may be sort of like some sort of like random things where, like say like Brian and Dimitri and Craig, they will pick up on the drone and while others pick up on the other thing. Like, so I'm gonna just throw things out there where you can find something that works for you. And if there's nothing there that works for you, then you need to ask me, right? But you can always go back to this very first exercise, which is you want to have the instrument in your hands for 10 minutes a day. And no plan. You don't have to have a plan. You just feel what it feels like. And you're allowed to play a note to know what that note sounds like. It doesn't mean that you need to know what the note sounds like before you play it. Not at all. It's actually very important that you're always surprised. Even if you know what the note sounds like, you want to be surprised when you play it. Yeah. So that's what we're gonna cultivate to start with. Yeah. Does that sound
Sounds
good?
good.
Good.
Yeah.
Does
Sounds great. Sounds perfect.
So some of you haven't said anything today. That's fine. If there's anything you still want to say, now is your chance. Can be anything.
I just
Rob?
want to say I'm really excited to work with this group and to get to know everyone over the next few months. So.
Great.
Yeah, I'm
Yes.
I'm really pleased to see other touch players and see what they do really. Marcus, is there going to be any place for people to post their exercises and that kind of thing?
Yes. Yes, we have a Discord server that we can use for that. Um, and I think we should still keep the email as sort of like the hub for everything. Obviously, you can't post your video. I shouldn't send you a video, but you can obviously send a video link in the emails as well. But we have the Discord available. We're going to share that link again for those who want to participate in the Discord. You can. Again, you don't have to. Like, we're going to keep this as a closed group with the email list, right? But yes, there is a Discord that can be used.
Oh, nice. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, this is just what I need, especially in terms of this first week's exercise, so I can work on actually. Yeah, maybe I'll take the instrument out of the case, and then where it's been since the workshop.
Yes.
So yeah.
So you see, John. So that's exactly what you need to do.
Yeah.
And it seems so obvious.
Mm-hmm.
But I know that for people like me, like I'm sort of like a person who'd rather stay in bed than get up in the morning.
Yeah,
right?
we're
Like some of us,
you're
right?
right about the shame spiral.
Yes. Yeah.
Circle. Yeah.
So that's why we start out with something that we know we can accomplish.
Okay.
Right? So we don't have to pressure ourselves into doing anything complicated at this point. We just want to establish a routine to pick up the instrument for a few minutes and to actually have a physical experience of touching the instrument and to hearing a sound.
I think I can do that. Thanks.
Yes, and not to make that feel like a chore, just something that you know you will enjoy. Like say, even if you think about like a partner or a child or something that you want to cuddle, like and in a way, it's that kind of relationship you want to establish with the musical instrument. And like if you cuddle your daughter, let's say, it's going to be nice. There's not a single time where it's not going to be nice, even if you're feeling bad, even if you're there's no situation where that's not a good thing. And it's the same with a musical instrument.
I have had that relationship, probably still do, with the Candy Apple Red. So
yeah,
I know what you're saying.
Okay, cool.
All right. Yeah.
Okay, everybody happy?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Wonderful.
Say it again.
Would you recommend recording also?
Again, yeah, you can. Yes, you can, but only if it doesn't add stress.
I know.
If it adds any kind of stress to you, you should not record. No, don't worry about it.
Okay.
We can do that later. Like once you have established, that you just do this, that you actually pick up the instrument. At some point, you can add the videoing or recording as an extra, as a bonus. But like only if it feels if it's okay for you to do at this point.
Understood. Thanks.
Yeah. All right. Good to see you all.
Sounds good, Marcus. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Good to see
Thank
you.
you very much. Good to see you too.
So I'm going to
See you guys. Take care.
I'm going to send this video to everybody as an unlisted link on YouTube, and please do not share outside of the group. Right? It's only for the group
Sure.
to watch
Yeah,
watch these videos. Okay.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Thank you so much, and see you soon. And I'll also make a suggestion for our next meeting. And sometimes the meetings can be like the Zoom meetings can be more frequent, but at least once a month we're gonna do that. At least. Okay.
Very good.
Okay, cool.
Excellent.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marcus.
Bye for
Take
now.
care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.